Welcome back to the Discovering Commercial Real Estate podcast. We have Principal of Atlas Realty Group, Erik Yankelovich, here with us today. Erik, it's a pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for doing this again.
Sure, my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Before we get into business, let's get a little sense of your background. So where are you from and how did you get into commercial real estate?
Sure. So, originally born in former Soviet Union, now known as Ukraine,
Right.
for the time being anyway. We immigrated to the States in 1990. I was about 10 years old at the time. Moved to South Brooklyn, where a lot of my friends and my relatives were. Frankly, they brought us in, and stuck around. Stuck around ever since then. Went to high school in Bensonhurst. Went to college in Stony Brook. It was like the perfect spot to be,
Right.
close enough, but not home. And after college, straight into real estate. Funny enough.
Amazing. And we talked before about how what you would be doing before commercial, like if not commercial real estate.
Right.
So what do you think that would be?
It's hard to answer the question based on how much I love this
Right.
work. I could just tell you that I started with I guess, pre-med, like most other
Right.
kids, I think my age, back in the mid-90s. Transitioned into computer science, finished with a computer science degree. At that point, they were chasing people. I remember giving them offers before they even finished school. So,
Right.
and I kind of liked the logic, I think, aspect of things. I think I like to consider myself a very logical guy, somewhat numbers, but more just, if then type of idea. And ultimately, my wife at the time, my girlfriend, said, "I think you should try real estate. I feel like it fits your
Mm.
personality." And I got into that. So I just can't. I mean, I definitely would be doing something, I think, that's somewhat sales related.
Mm.
Clearly, something that's independent, where having worked through college in salary jobs, I
Right.
do not see myself being able to do that. But it would definitely be something entrepreneurial. I'd like to think.
So you like the unlimited upside aspect of it?
I like the unlimited ops. I think it's hard for me to motivate myself, not, or knowing that I have a certain limit of how much
Right.
money I can make or how much success I can have, or just, finish your job and you're done. It just doesn't seem to drive me mentally.
Got it.
And in this business, you're always pushing, you're always chasing, and I just enjoy that. I think in anything entrepreneurial, you have that ability to kind of work on those skill sets and go and succeed, and you eat what you kill, so to speak. So I want to be out there hunting for something. I don't want to just say, okay,
100%.
here's your job, check off, and you're done. It just doesn't seem, I don't know, it just doesn't seem exciting to me.
Right. 100%. So you started doing this at GFI. And so walk us through your experience at GFI and how that kind of prepared you to be a principal.
Sure. I was very blessed to start at GFI. I worked under some of the biggest names in the industry, people who have just crushed it in this field. I actually came in with a little bit of experience because I started in a small office in Brooklyn,
Right.
in South Brooklyn. Right away gravitated towards commercial. It was a residential office, but somehow I ended up doing the commercial leasing up and down, like the commercial thoroughfares in Brooklyn. Try to do sales, investment sales,
Hmm.
but it was just a different level. And I remember coming in for an interview at one point to be an assistant to the head broker, Aaron Younggrace, who's truly a very skilled
Yeah.
person
Legend.
who really works really hard. And it was a blessing for me to kind of be exposed to that. Maybe at the time I didn't really realize to what
Mm.
degree and how much I was able to absorb. It's like osmosis, just being there.
Right.
Just helps you out. So from there, I was able to transition within 2 years into brokerage, and then eventually, after a certain long period of
Right.
time, open up my own shop with guys I
Amazing.
met in GFI.
Amazing. And who were your first mentors that kind of guided you through the process?
Um, so first and foremost, I learned everything in this residential office from a guy who gave me a lot of time, explained to me all the basics. When I came into GFI, I was able to kind of just see a different level, different
Mm.
league of that game.
Mm-hmm.
And people there, from the head brokers to from the head broker there at the time to some other senior guys who really put the time and really seemed to kind of care and give me certain knowledge, because they wanted, I guess, to see a young kid do well.
Right. Yeah. Of course. And do you think that this experience in residential kind of gave you a different perspective where you were able to build a foundation and eventually transition into multifamily commercial assets?
No question about it. I mean, I came in with certain basic knowledge of investment sales.
Right.
Also realized one thing: I do not want to be selling homes or apartments, co-ops, condos.
Right.
I found that to be more of an emotional connection for buyers and sellers, which I didn't really relate to. I like the
Mm-hmm.
business side of the mentality,
Right.
and then ultimately being exposed to guys who are focused strictly on investment sales. It just allowed me to really get to love the business. I mean, it
Mm.
was something that I just enjoyed. It's something that I enjoyed reading about. I was just looking forward to absorbing as much as I can, and ultimately obviously making money. I mean, that's what we're
Right.
all there for. But you have to love the business, in which I clearly naturally
Right.
gravitated to. So thanks to my wife, who called it pretty early
Yeah.
in our lives, it was definitely the right fit for me.
100%. And what would you say is the difference in skill sets between a successful residential broker and a commercial broker?
So I think that game has changed significantly since I started in the business over
Mhm.
22 years ago. It seems today that it is a lot more marketing based, when it as far
Mhm.
as social media goes, getting your name out there and coming up with exciting content. I don't know if it's as much brokerage as it is just marketing,
Right.
which is great. I mean, it's awesome. I follow a lot of people that are in that. Obviously, there's a bunch of shows that I'm
Yeah.
sure we all know about, and that gives us ideas. Also, kind of inspires us as well to do certain things. But ultimately, the commercial side of the business is just business.
Yeah.
It's more private. Also, people don't necessarily want to know they want to have their stuff out there.
Mhm.
It's relationship driven. It's how you deal with people on a whole different level than it is about trying to convince them to buy a place where they're most likely
Of
to live for
course.
a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. And what prompted you to make your decision to leave GFI and kind of go off on your own? And how long did you plan it before you pulled the trigger?
Sure. So I think for me, I was in GFI for over 16 years before I made the change, and frankly, there was a period for a while before there where I was already kind of looking for the next stage of my
Mm.
life, of my career. You reach a certain plateau where you maybe are not as challenged anymore, and things happen that you just kind of feel like it's time for a change. It's
Right.
time for something new, and I had a hard time finding the right transition.
Mm.
I didn't want to make a lateral move just to say, okay, I changed things up, and that took time. And I think luckily, where my two partners, Josef Katz and Shlomo Entaby, who were with me in GFI for also a long time, about 13 years
Mhm.
each, we got to know each other pretty well over the years, and market was getting rough. And we always knew, I mean, our mentors always told us, this is the time to build, this is the time to invest in yourselves. In fact, I remember during those last few months when we were giving these lectures, it's exactly what was said to us. Like, this is the time, and I'm like, we're looking at each other. This is exactly the
Right.
time, and we finally decided, okay, it's time to make a move. And three of us met, agreed that this is a good opportunity to start something where the market is maybe a little slow,
Mhm.
and go from there and build.
Great. Amazing. And so, what is Atlas Realty Group? Can you give us a little breakdown of what gap is filled in the market by this company? And what's your long term vision for this?
So ARG, as we like to call it for short, I don't think anybody has the patience to pronounce the entire
Yeah.
name in full. I know I don't sometimes. It's really kind of that middle market investment sales brokerage. We focus on, like, I would say, $2 to $50 million deals. Our average deal is probably around a $10 million
Hmm.
deal. Anything from packages to single buildings. Our bread and butter has historically and still continues to be multifamily, which in New York City means rent
Right.
stabilized apartment buildings. That's something we know very well. We know the product well. We know the players well. They know us. We have good relationships there. We have a very unique reach, I think, as well. There's clearly a lot of other shops that are doing the same thing. But we'd like to pride ourselves on having a little bit of a different reach, and
Mm.
really knowing the product well in our sub markets, and primarily in the five boroughs, I would say. Staten Island being the least, just not a lot of trades
Right.
happen there in that space, unfortunately. Although there's interest,
Right.
and we think it's one of the safest investment vehicles you can have, and we continue to see we continue to see interest. We see
Right.
interest from buyers who haven't been active for years, who are now jumping back in. So we think the future is very strong in that business, if you understand the business and you have the right shop set up.
Right.
We've seen a lot of guys do very well over the years, and we expect it to continue that way.
Got it. And when it comes to understanding the multifamily rent stabilized business, how much of it comes down to understanding people, and how much of it comes down to understanding the asset? Would you say it's an even mix between these two things?
I think it is important to 100% understand both sides of it. I think that the players who are in this game, specifically when it comes to rent stabilized
Right.
apartment buildings, they know the business very well. One of the things that I find myself sometimes walking buildings with other brokers, maybe younger brokers, and for me, I can never convince anybody to do anything as far as I'm concerned. They know what they're doing.
Right.
I'm not there to tell them or to pitch them or to sell them, oh, look how great this or that idea is. I'm just there to make sure that I deliver a deal, I have access to the right product, and I steer it to closing. That's
Mm.
my job. So ultimately, you have to understand what your client wants, so you're not wasting their time with deals that are not going to be up their alley, or price expectations that are not real. But at the same point in time, you have to be realistic about what the sellers should be
Right.
expecting, and that side of the business as well. So I think that gives everybody the best chance of success. Understanding everybody's ultimate goal puts everybody in the best chance to have successful transaction.
100%. And what mistakes do you see other investment sales brokers making that you think may be holding them back in their career?
I think you have to have long-term kind of vision. You
Mm.
have to want to do this. I think long-term, you
Right.
have to have this as your career. If you're just in it for the quick,
The quick buck.
buck,
Yeah.
and you're just trying to max out what you can make, and you're moving on to the next thing, it's a lot more difficult, I think, to see success. Reputation is obviously very, very important. I've had misunderstandings with some of my best clients where I can sincerely see that we just misunderstood each other. We should have maybe put things in writing
Right.
so that it's very clearly spelled out, because people can hear different things walking out of the same lecture and have an argument about what they just heard.
Right.
And ultimately, it's important to focus on that. If you're looking to do this long term, you have to stick to your principles
Mm.
and do what's right, not what's good for you in the short term.
Got it. 100%. And I want to ask about owners' mindset. So, what are some creative ways that owners can add value to their buildings?
Well, so it depends what asset class we're talking about. If you're talking about rent
Yeah.
stabilized, very few things can be done today to add value. It's very difficult to increase income.
Right.
Expenses seem to be going up. People have found ways of adding some value by doing certain renovations or combining units, which may go away at some
Right.
point. People find ways of renting out space that's not residential and adding value that
Right.
way. Sometimes you can build, if you have air rights, to add value that way, which is not an easy, and certainly in New York City with DOB and regulations and everything, it's a very difficult process. Um, Other asset classes, again, it depends. I think you have to be very mindful of where the market is. You have to be mindful of what kind of leases you're signing, who
Right.
your leases are with, how long those leases are, and what the options are, especially with today's inflation. I think you have to be
Right.
very mindful of, what happens when my leases roll. So savvy investors, keep their eye on their pulse on the market and kind of adjust as they go.
Right. 100%. And as an investment sales broker, what do you kind of go in and give them value wise, where you do something beyond the job?
So, I mean, look, we all love taking on listings, and there are certainly times where it comes to a certain deal where you sometimes have to kind of take a step back and say, look, I don't think you're ready to
Right.
sell. I think whether you have a certain violation count or you have certain issues in the building, fix it, clean it up, or you have certain leases that are going to be rolling. People love to put projections. Well, look, my lease is going to expire
Yeah.
within around the same time you're going to close on the building. Well, it's not the same thing. Like, nobody wants to pay you for that upside.
Right.
They want to buy it. No, the upside is there. So if you think that the market or the price is not right yet, wait. I think it's important as brokers not to just be so hungry, rather,
Right.
that you want to jump on every deal that comes across your way. Sometimes you have to take a step back. The best thing for your client is, let's wait a month, 2, 3 months. Let's come
Mm.
back to the market. Maybe the environment is not right because of other factors such as interest rates. So I think it's just important to sometimes take a step back before you start pushing. Say, okay, let's go. I'm ready to sell it for you.
Yeah, definitely. And what does your ideal client look like?
I mean, somebody who's just realistic with their
Mm.
expectations. Somebody who knows the market well enough. Somebody who trusts us when we
Hmm.
advise them. I'm sure there's people out there who think, oh, a broker just wants to do a deal and make his commission and
Right.
move on. And frankly, that's when I think, as a seller, we advise our clients, sign an exclusive with a broker. I mean, obviously, we'd love it to be us, and we
Right.
think we do as good of a job as anybody, if not better. But have somebody who works for you, for your interest. Don't just
Right.
have a deal that's out there with a bunch of different guys trying to shove it off down your throat because all they care about is their commission. They don't really care about getting you the best
Yeah.
price.
So you think exclusivity is like the truest alignment of interest between a broker and owner?
100%. Not only does it guarantee the seller the best results,
Right.
because of the fact that they're in the interest. Buyers are now looking at it a little bit more seriously because
Right.
they're like, okay, this owner hired a broker. They
It's
clearly want to go
serious.
to market. They want to sell it. They're not just saying, let me see if there's a fool out there who's going to overpay.
Right.
It just gives people, and when there's deals out there and guys have deals across their desk, they don't want to spend time on deals that are just not realistic. And now all of a sudden they got this setup from 2, 3 other guys.
Yeah.
Who has control? Who doesn't have control? They're gonna probably push it to the back of their pile.
Definitely. And how do you work out how real a buyer or seller is? Is there a question that you like to ask to get a sense of who you're dealing with?
It's really tough to answer that or to know that information. Yes, we ask certain questions.
Right.
I think when it comes to a seller, as I just mentioned, he has to be realistic. If a seller gives me a property to sell and comes to me and say, what do I think it's worth? And I give him an indication.
Yeah.
And he's like, there's no way I'm selling for that price. I'm going to tell him, look, there's a certain, maybe give where I can go to market, but you're going to hurt yourself. And then there's a certain point where I'm just not going to take the listing on, because if you're not selling for whatever the best price the market will bring, within reason, obviously, then you're just not a seller. And these are not the days where, I used to be able to call people and tell them, hey,
Right.
I think I get you this much. And they, really, if you could get me that amount. There's many guys today who are saying they'd be happy to be out at a certain
Right.
level, but it's just not realistic anymore. And for a buyer, a lot of people have to show you their proof of funds or give you an indication of what they own. And I've seen people sit in a lot of equity. It doesn't mean they're buying either.
Got it.
It really does not mean they're buying. You want to kind of understand what their motivations are for buying. You want to understand, do they have the right team in place to manage a property? If the guy is just kind of kicking tires just because he wants to understand the market and buy in, a year from now or
Right.
whatever, we usually can feel that, and we try not to waste the time with those guys. But also, it's part of building certain relationships.
Right.
Sometimes you have to go through those motions with certain owners just to get to know them, and then eventually you hope that they will transact.
100%. And is it true that if an asset is priced right from the start, the seller will get the highest return on their time and sell the asset more efficiently?
100%. Because what ends up happening is that if you come out to market with an overpriced listing, it just gets pushed to the back.
Yeah.
Now, what ends up happening is that, first of all, people start lowballing you. Second of all, it'll come back if and when the price comes down, which it will have to. It's now a stale listing. So, if you price it right, there's that fine line where you could create certain situations where you may have some bidding wars as well.
Right.
It's rare that it happens, I think, in today's day and age. But when it's priced right and they see that this guy is serious, he wants to make a deal. Now, before you know it, you do have 2 or 3 or 4 real guys making real offers close to the ask or at ask. Now you're putting yourself in the best situation
Right.
as a seller to capitalize.
And how do you present to the seller what the price is based off of? Is it based off market comparables, other deals that are happening in contract, or whatever it is?
Right. So again, because we're active, our ear is very low to the ground.
Right.
We know everything that goes on for the most part. Even if it's not our transactions, we know about those transactions, and that information, right, gets passed on to our clients. And there are different factors that will make a difference what the property, how to value a property. But ultimately, you have to look at every property individually,
Right.
and you have to guide them accordingly. You have to explain to them why we think this is the right price today. We give them all the metrics of, which are relevant, which are not relevant for a specific deal. Ultimately, it's obviously their decision, but we think we come with enough intelligence for them to really trust in what we're saying and making the best decision they can.
Got it. 100%. And how do you remain like top of mind with buyers and sellers without being pushy?
It's an interesting question, because sometimes I wonder, and I think it's also depending on your personal personality.
Right.
And I think that's when some of the skills that some of them you learn. Is nothing like experience, nothing like gray hair. As much as you could be very, very knowledgeable about what's happening, as much as you can have intelligence and be good with numbers, there's certain things that you just pick up through the years. But ultimately, it's just important to kind of be honest with yourself. And there's ways of pushing people, but not making them feel like you're choking them.
Right.
And I think as long as you come with sincere information, not just again for your own, selfish reasons,
Right.
just to close a deal, I think it comes across. I think people feel it. They can sense, is this guy full of it? Is he just pushing me, or does it make sense? And again, a lot of these guys, I'm sure they talk to a lot of other people in the industry. They have their knowledge,
Right.
and when your knowledge aligns with everything else they are thinking, is when you're probably going to end up
And they start to
striking,
trust you.
yeah, and making a deal.
100%. And what early career mistake did you make that you will never make again, and you encourage other people to never make?
Yeah, I think I've really been blessed in the way that I haven't done anything crazy that I can look back and really, really regret. I think I've learned, and as I said, with experience, it just comes, with those years of experience, just comes to you a little bit more, it becomes
Mm,
a little bit more clear of, first of all, not, knowing not how to waste your time
right,
and having that, you know, that hope of, okay, I'm going to get this done and
right,
hoping it's going to happen versus being realistic and knowing where to cut your losses, so to speak, and say, okay, look, you're not serious. Whether you're a buyer or seller, it's a waste of everybody's time
right.
because, we try to please people. And sometimes I think we're maybe trying too hard to please people, where it's just not realistic. You end up wasting your time and everybody else's time. And ultimately, you have to learn that don't make the decision just for that moment. As I said, when
Right,
you're just trying to make that one commission, not no one commission is worth your career.
right.
It's not going to change your life. So your reputation ultimately can really change over one deal,
Mm,
but your life will not. So as long as you keep that in mind and you do want to do this long term, bear that in mind and do what's right for you and for everybody else. Ultimately, will pay off.
right. So you think as an investment sales broker, it's important to zoom out and kind of look at things decades down the line, multiple decades down the line, instead of 4 or 5 days down the line.
100%. I mean, I think it's, again, if you're just trying to make that quick deal and push a guy to do something
Right,
he's not going to want to do, or you're doing it in a way where it's maybe not 100% transparent,
right,
it's going to come back. It's going to come back to bite you, and it's just not worth it. There's enough out there
yeah,
where you got to do things the right way and stay the course. And ultimately, if this is what you want to do for a living long term, you stay the course. You shouldn't worry about having to do things that you're going to make you feel uneasy
right.
inside.
Yeah, definitely. And what do you look for in a new hire?
That's a tough one because I've seen a lot of faces come and go through the years. I'm doing this a long time. Before we had our own shop. Now that we have our own shop, also, we've had guys come and go. Um, it's hard to really judge. You know
Mm,
what? It's a situation where sometimes you meet a guy and you're like, okay, this guy's definitely gonna make it, or this guy definitely will not.
right,
I've seen both ends of the spectrum. I've seen guys who didn't make it for the first maybe 2 years, and then eventually they started making deals and becoming pretty good
right,
brokers. And I've seen guys where they were very good on the phone and they just can't seem to knock anything out of the park.
right,
You do want to see grit. You want to see somebody who has very thick skin, somebody who's prepared to hear no, get hung up on all the time, and keep going. You have to stay motivated,
right.
and you're the only one who can motivate
Yeah,
yourself, because energy can be on up and down in an office. It could be, life is up and down. If you can't motivate yourself and you don't love what you do, you don't like live, breathe, and eat real estate, I don't know if you could be as successful.
right.
And also, maybe that's not what you should be doing, because you have to really want to do it. You have to want to get up in the morning and you know go hunting like
Yeah,
this every day.
yeah, 100%. And what does the training process at ARG look like, where you train somebody to think like this and be like this?
So I think one of the best things about the ARG that we provide is that you have the benefit of having all three of us
Mm,
between, Shlomo, Yosef, and myself. We're always
mm,
accessible. We're always there providing feedback.
great.
And in addition to that, we're also giving you a senior broker who's going to be working with you.
Mm,
So in essence, you'll end up getting four people who are kind of mentoring you. And we'll go through specifics individually. We have weekly meetings. We'll have sometimes monthly
mm,
classes. Again, if it's a new hire, obviously that's a lot more frequent, where we're setting you up right
right,
away to make sure we give you the right skills. We're also providing pretty much everything that you need to have as far as technology goes. You don't pay for anything. You come,
right,
you work, and that's it. You don't pay a dollar for anything that many other, I think, shops make people pay for. And also, we have the benefit of being in another similar environment for many, many years.
right.
We've seen it done a lot of different ways. We've learned, we've tasted every side of that.
Mm-hmm.
Being a junior, or a new broker, and maybe sometimes feeling like things shouldn't be the way they are. So we would like to think we have the benefit of kind of knowing what it tastes like when things are
Right,
not exactly done properly, and you've learned from that, and you try to pass on now a completely different way of approaching the new
right,
guys, so that they feel more empowered and can be successful and can want to stick around for a
right.
long time.
So you harness you and your two other principals, all of your experience into kind of a well-defined system that you can apply to new hires.
100%. I mean, the three of us are just as accessible as each one
Right.
individually, and ultimately we're all very different. I think one of the best things about us is that we bring such different skill sets to
Mm.
the industry, to our office, that you learn a lot from each one of us. I mean, we are very different people.
Mhm.
Our style is different, our approach is different, but our results are very similar. Thank God we've done a lot of business over the last 20 some years, and you can see our results speak for themselves. But yet we kind of give you so many different aspects of it,
Right.
versus going to an office where maybe you have just one broker who's overseeing you, or they're hiring a trainer who's
Right.
not even in the business, but
Yeah.
he just knows the lingo. He knows how to give you the right, list of ways to make phone calls.
Yeah.
It's not the same as somebody who breathes this business, for a long time.
100%. And would you say you complement you and your principals? You complement each other's strengths and weaknesses, and kind of fill each other's gaps, and that's what makes a good team.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we always, I think, want to hear the other's
Right.
opinion when we are working on something or there's a question mark. And even though each one of us is very capable on our own, when things get, you kind of want to just, you have this process that you want to go through, like quality control
Right.
almost, where you can kind of just, hey, what do you think? I'm thinking this is what I'm going to
Yeah.
do. And he may give you a little different spin to it, or a different, like, intricate detail. They're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And now
Yeah.
you kind of apply your style, your approach,
With a new
with
perspective.
his
Yeah.
perspective, with his insight, with his idea, and I think it works beautifully. I think it gives us really an advantage of a lot of other, shops.
Definitely. Definitely. And what are some ways that a commercial broker can set themselves apart? What do you think is an underutilized tool that many people often dismiss?
I mean, again, I think it comes down to a lot of it is personality.
Mm.
I think it's important to be compassionate, to have empathy for people on both sides of the deal.
Right.
It's hard to learn that, sometimes it's just something that's not natural for
Right.
people. Um, but also you have to know your business. You have to know, you have to read, you have to understand the deals, you have to understand why this makes sense, why that doesn't. You have to
Right.
understand why people are paying certain numbers and why they don't. And if you're constantly on top of your game by reading, by following the transactions, and you're putting your those interests together with meaning your skills with the
Right.
interests of your clients, I think you'll succeed. I mean, there's not one thing that you can say is under. I think maybe it's that compassion. I think sometimes
Right.
people, it's just business,
Yep.
but it's not just business, because if you don't treat people the right
Right.
way, they may not come back to you, or they eventually may focus on the next broker who's hounding them just probably as much as you are.
Definitely, yeah. And would you say in this business specifically, it's important because for example, a business like where somebody's trading stocks, it's a completely different thing, where it's more process based. But in this business, it's more people based,
Right.
and you have to be compassionate.
Yeah, 100%. This is a people business. I mean, this is a relationship
Right.
driven business. There's no doubt about it. I mean, and frankly, I think a lot of people don't realize this, as young brokers who are trying to get into the business.
Right.
In commercial sales, you do not need to have a lot of clients to be
Yeah.
successful and make a lot of money, and really stay busy. I mean, you really need a handful
Strong. Yeah.
of
Strong
repeat,
relationships.
yeah, strong relationships, repeat business from the same few guys that you've, developed good,
Right.
understanding of. They trust you now, and you'll be fine. You'll do some side business as well. You always have to, we'll always call calling. I
Right.
mean, it doesn't end. It
Yeah.
never ends. Sometimes you don't, frankly, I feel like I didn't do it enough because I'm
Right.
busy with everything else I have going on, where I'm not, but you have to focus on building that next book of business as
Right.
well.
100%. So you're always building that book of business, no matter
Always,
what.
always, no matter what. This never ends.
Right.
There's always new players coming in. There's old timers coming in who haven't done this in a
Right.
while as well.
And that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, and that keeps it also fresh.
Right.
No question about it. And also, you planting that seed, you don't know when that fruit is gonna come.
Right.
You're gonna bear that fruit. I mean, it could be years. I mean,
Right.
some of my best clients, I think, took me, I want to say 7, 8 years to do my first deal with.
Right. And did you have the intention of closing the deal, or was it something that kind of just naturally progressed into a business relationship?
I mean, I try closing deals right away with the guys. You always kind of trying to do something with certain somebody.
Right.
Sometimes you get lucky and you do. As new brokers, we've seen some guys come in, by the way, and hit it big in the first few months.
Right.
You don't hear from them ever again because they just made like a $30 million
And now they're
deal in the
out.
first, 3, 4 months of their
Right.
business. They think, oh, God's gift to
Right.
this industry, and then they kind of lose focus, maybe, I don't know, and they're not successful anymore. But yeah, some guys, you just have to know, hey, look, it's okay. I'm gonna work this relationship. I'm gonna understand what he wants. If it's not this one, it's gonna be down the road, and just
Right.
don't give up. Do not ever give up, and always follow up. Always constantly follow up. Same guy, same deal. Few months difference. He's in a different situation. He's thinking differently. He all of a sudden has a reason to do whatever maybe before he didn't
Right.
want to do. You just have to stay on top of
Catch them at the
people.
right time.
Yeah, right. It's timing is key. Timing
Right.
kills deals, and timing also makes deals
Makes sense.
happen. It's
Yeah.
it's just that's just the way it is.
100%. And what value can a young professional provide for you to make you more inclined to either help them or hire them or whatever it is?
I think you just want to see, somebody that's committed and is working. You want to see guys who are putting in the time,
Right.
making the calls, guys who are trying. It's okay if you're not closing deals,
Right.
as long as you're really trying, as long as you're putting your best effort forward. Stay positive in the long haul. If this is what you want to do and you believe,
Right.
you have to believe you're going to be successful. There's no question about it. You can't come in with a negative
Yeah.
attitude, even if you're kind of putting in the work. If your mentality is negative, it just probably will not translate to great results. So when we see that, we're definitely there for people. When a guy is not in the office and all of a sudden he's hounding you for an appointment, I mean, why aren't you in the office a little bit
Yeah.
more often,
Yeah.
maybe? You know what I mean? Just sometimes you have to be mindful of that as a young broker, that, hey, put in the time and people will reciprocate at the end of the day.
Definitely. And what does your typical day as an investment sales broker look like? Can you guys kind of walk us through morning to night?
So again, days do vary somewhat,
Right.
but I guess one of the keys for me is always try to get my appointments first thing in the morning. While it's nice and sunny outside, it's early. Also gives you the whole day,
Right.
to do whatever else you need to do, whether it's in the office or to go to other meetings. But try to get your meetings first thing in the morning,
Right.
and then you're in the office. And again, you got to structure your days the way that works for you. Whether you're working on certain deals, or whether you're cold calling or chasing certain deals, or doing homework, research.
Right.
Just to stay on the game. You probably want to do that after hours when you can't really get people on the phone as
Yeah.
easily. So there are certain kind of very, very basic, broad ideas that I think are important to bear in mind, and it's really not that difficult to figure it out.
100%. And would you say a successful broker kind of doesn't stick to that 9 to 5? They kind of just work 24/7, or always thinking about what's the next step for their career?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no question this business consumes you a little bit.
Right.
Um, I don't know. Maybe you kind of it has to for you to be successful.
Right.
I'm not sure. But it's always on my mind, and it's hard. It is a challenge sometimes where you do, I think, need to disconnect yourself and put the phone away. I mean, that's addictive to begin with.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, especially when now it's your life, it's your business. It's how you make money. But you have to really live this business. I
Right.
mean, I don't know if you could be very successful if you don't live this. If you're not driving down the block and you're looking at buildings, and
Yeah.
you're memorizing the facade, how many floors, or what's happening around the corner. Is a new tenant coming in? Is there construction? I mean, these things just they have to naturally,
Right.
kind of want to
Interest you.
interest you,
Yeah.
and then ultimately translates when you're on the phone with people, when you're doing transactions, and you can, mention certain details that, like, I mean, it's easier today because you could just Google and look it up.
Right. Yeah.
But when you remember it off, off your head, off your
It's
memory,
impressive. Yeah.
I think it comes across.
Definitely. And how do you make money in a down investment sales market, in a bad market?
Right. So, I mean, that's look, we're just middlemen at the end
Yeah.
of the day, right? And people do need to transact. I mean, a lot of guys who are just deal junkies,
Right.
and they just want to keep transacting. Obviously, when volume is down, which frankly is now because of a lot of different
Yeah.
intricate details, it's a little bit more difficult. But with years, as you build those relationships, the down markets, you could still transact. You can still, as long as you know your product well,
Right.
and people, as I said earlier, are realistic about their expectations. There's business to be had.
Right. And how do you position yourself to be the kind of broker that does have the volume in low volume situations, in low volume market situations?
So I think that comes with, again, as I said earlier, staying on
Experience.
top of people,
Okay.
following up constantly, and not assuming things. When the guy tells you he's not interested, or the price is high, or he's not buying, call, follow up, check
Right.
in. There's nothing wrong. It's your job to be annoying in a
Right.
way. Obviously, do it in a professional way,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's part of the job is just to stay on top of people. Um, Ultimately, I think again, cold calling and
Mm.
just trying to pick up new clients. Staying on top of who's transacting, and calling guys you haven't called before, guys you
Mm.
maybe couldn't get through before. Just keep calling, keep hunting them. If you have to show up at their office randomly, just say, "Hey, I'm in the neighborhood." Even though you're not, but you
Right.
can
Yeah.
run over
Yeah.
there. If he tells you, "Yeah, sure, come in," you go. You meet people. I think meeting people is also very important, especially today where everything seems to be digital. Everybody's just
Right.
let me text, let me email. It's not the same. I mean, phone calls,
In person.
in-person meetings. First of all, there's body language you can
Yep.
pick up. You can read people even though they're saying one thing,
Yep.
but they're really trying to tell you something else. They just don't want to say it. You can sense it.
Right.
Again, with experience, you kind of learn that a little bit more. You kind of pick up on those, those things a little bit more to
Right.
understand what's really going on. But you'll only learn if you're on the phone or you're in person. You will not learn. You will not pick things up if it's
Over
just a
text. Yeah.
message.
Yeah. 100%. And what are some of your ways to gauge whether we're in a down market? Are there any specific property types or submarkets that you kind of look at as benchmarks?
I mean, for us, it really comes down to volume, and we
Mm.
could see. We
Okay.
could see when guys are just simply on the
Right.
sidelines, and there's a disconnect between buyers and sellers. I don't think that you can point to any one specific
Right.
sub-market or asset class to really
Got it.
say, okay, it's one. I think everything kind of rises and comes down with the tide, so to speak.
Right.
So you'll see it across every asset class. I don't think I could really pinpoint to a
So it's
specific
more of
asset.
like a sense that you get based on the conversations and patterns that you're picking up.
Right. It stems from your clients. You financing. I
Right.
mean, financing really. I guess if you want to say one detail, right, is where the banks are.
Yeah.
Where's the money? Is the money easily attainable?
Right.
People always leverage, no matter how much equity they're sitting on. Everybody leverages for the most part. And if you can't really get the right financing from
It's
lenders,
gonna affect.
it's
Yeah.
going to affect business. So that's probably your one biggest indicator of where things are, which is today's day and age. That's what we're seeing. We're seeing
Right.
a lot of uncertainty about what the rates are going to be, where they are, and how much proceeds you're going to get on deals. That's
Right.
affecting values tremendously.
And what's your perspective on how that's gonna progress over the next year for 2023 and 2024?
I think it's going to get worse. I think
Mm.
banks are going to stay tight. I think rates are going to keep climbing to a
Mm.
certain degree. Um, Question is how long. I think definitely for sure in the next 12 to 18 months, it's very hard to envision
Right.
values coming up. I think if people want to be realistic with themselves and they have to refinance, and they don't have the equity to come out of pocket potentially, it's a rough ride for them. But again, the expectations seem to be that rates will eventually come down
Yeah.
somewhat. Again, it's every cycle is different, and we've been through a few cycles already. We've seen a lot of different things, and every time it's something different, it's another surprise. I mean, the
Right.
world is just unpredictable to begin with, and it's really hard to kind of make a very clear call on
Yeah.
things. But you have to weigh all the risks, and you have to figure out what's my best decision at the moment,
Hmm.
and not worry about it. Sometimes it's gonna work out for the best, and you'll be you look like a genius,
Right.
and sometimes you'll say, okay, maybe I pulled too early or I waited too long.
Definitely. And do you think it's important to be malleable as a broker, where you kind of are not stuck in your ways and you're able to adapt based on every situation in the market?
Look, I mean, certain skills you just have to have and just keep, be comfortable with and work on.
Right.
But as far as adapting, I mean, yeah, you're always adapting to how the market changes. You have to, that's how, you have to stay on top of what's happening,
Right.
why people are thinking what they're thinking, why lenders are thinking what they're thinking. Whether you're a seller or buyer, you have to understand what their objective is. And that's just kind of staying knowledgeable,
Right.
staying, talking, as comes with talking to people as well. Again, if you're on the phone with people, there's information that comes to you that makes you more knowledgeable, makes you smarter, and information is key. When you're talking to the next guy, you're gonna have certain things that you just heard from somebody else
Right.
that maybe this guy didn't think of, and now you can relay certain information to them as well that ultimately gains your respect.
Definitely. 100%. And what have you learned about yourself since you've closed your first deal?
I mean, I remember my first deal. I think I was so excited, and it wasn't about any. One thing I learned, it wasn't about the money.
Right.
I didn't even get the money yet, but I was just like I was hungry for the next
The
transaction.
experience. Yeah.
I remember coming back to the office after the closing pretty late in the day, maybe like 4 or 5 p.m., and
Right.
wanting to be in the office until like midnight, just
Wow.
to get
Okay.
that next
Yeah.
deal
Yeah.
under my belt. Again, I always enjoyed that chase. I always enjoyed that hunt,
Right.
and I've never, thank God I've been successful, but I've never enjoyed actually getting paid as much as I have just getting a deal
Right.
done. Just that feeling is just special.
100%. Would you say it's addicting to the point where even though it's a difficult process, you still go back to it and you want to do it again?
100%. It's very, very addicting, and even after all these years, the pain of losing deals sometimes is so much
Right.
greater. It's depending on the deal and how much you put into it and how rough it got,
Right.
and when you lost it, then the pleasure of winning. Some deals that are just easy and they're godsend. Thank God we've been very blessed to have those
Right.
as well. But that pain just is still strong. So the key is to stay busy and not focus and not dwell. That's,
Right.
by the way, another thing I think for young brokers, as far as don't dwell on things that you can't control
Yeah.
anymore. Move on and stay as busy as you can, because
Yeah.
when you do, you're just moving on to the next step. You're not beating yourself up to a point where you just can't get up in the morning and go to
Yeah.
work.
Definitely. 100%. And what has been the most difficult point in your career, and how did that shape you as an individual from that point on?
Um, I mean, there was a period where I think I was in that stage where I wasn't sure, am I in the right place?
Mm.
Do I even want to stay in the business? Because I didn't feel like I'm in the right place,
Mm.
with my career. And there was a lot of uncertainty. Market was maybe rough, and you just don't know what the future holds.
Mm.
You don't seem to be able to make any progress where you are, and you just kind of like not sure. What should I be doing? Should
Right.
I change careers? Should I get out of the business completely? Should I talk to people about other businesses? I mean, there was definitely a moment where I was just not sure. And this is
Right.
after many years and still having success and still closing deals and still, doing things where you kind of lost that steam.
Right.
You lost the steam, and that's when I realized that it's definitely time for a change. And again, with time, luckily, I've been blessed that I found the right partnership where we were able to transition to something that you felt like your career just took off to another level. Now you're excited again.
Right. So
You have to just persevere. I think that the only thing you learn from that is, listen, this is what you do. You enjoy what you're doing. There's going to be ups and downs. I mean,
right.
that's life. It's a roller coaster.
Right.
Try to stay balanced. Try to stay even keeled in the moments when they're up. And as was somebody, I just saw a little snippet on like YouTube or something, where this too shall pass. The bad times
Right.
will pass, but guess what? Those awesome times when you're just crushing it, they're also going to
Oh,
pass,
yeah.
because you're going to be back down on that roller coaster.
Right.
And just know that it's okay. It's part of the ride. As long as you stay balanced and kind of stay, knowing that, hey, it's part of the game.
Right.
Things are going to turn back around, and you're going to be fine on the long haul. It always is, man.
Right.
It always is. Just have to believe it.
100%. So do you think that the mindset that you adopt is you can't necessarily control the ups and downs of the roller coaster, but you can learn to be more comfortable riding the roller coaster and enjoying it
Right. You can't control the ups and downs. You can control
yourself?
to a point where give yourself the best chance of succeeding when those ups and downs come, because
Right.
they will. Right. So if you approach it the right way, from every aspect, mentally, your personal life, professional life, everything else, physically as well. By
Right.
the way, I think that you just give yourself the best chance of riding out those rough times, those bumps, with
Right.
minimal damage.
Right. And these bad times are always going to happen, even if like someone like yourself that's been in the career for over 20 years. Would you say that this feeling that young people have is that there's going to be a point where it's just never going to have a bad time ever again? It's just going to be smooth sailing from there. And have you ever seen smooth sailing for yourself?
I mean, I think people just in general seem to have lack of patience these days.
Right.
I mean, it happens, I think, to all of us,
Yeah.
right? Especially with, I think, technology and what's going on
Yeah.
in the world today, I think, where we just want instant gratification of everything we do.
Right.
So we kind of lose track when we think that, oh, it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen, from relationships to business. It's the same story, I think, where people just throw in the towel, not meant
Right.
to be, I'm out. So if you take that approach, you're constantly going to be, I think, struggling
Disappointed.
and yeah, disappointed, and always, falling and having to come back up. I think if you have that patience and know that those downs are going to be there for the rest of the life, but
Right.
it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
It's part of the ride. It's not, it's not something you can't overcome. You overcome it before, you're gonna overcome it again.
Right. Definitely.
And I think if you keep that mentality and empower yourself and stay confident and build on that confidence to learn, to keep learning, to keep working,
Right.
and just kind of putting it behind you, it's gonna happen for you.
100%. And what are some of your daily habits where you voluntarily put yourself out of your comfort zone and grow as a man and as a professional?
Um, so I think as I got older, I think my body just forced me, ultimately to just know that you can't just always have fun. You can't just
Right.
do things just because they're fun. So for me personally, it became a situation where I had to invest in actually like real exercise,
Right.
not just playing sports because they're fun
Yeah.
and because it's competitive. I think as I'm just a competitive person by nature, I think that's what maybe makes me, what I am in the business.
Right.
Um, so I think ultimately for me, it's knowing that I got to be up at 5:15 in the morning, because now I've already achieved something
Yeah.
that just gets my day started where I'm already like on a positive note. I mean, there's never been a time where I woke up early in the morning and went to exercise or whatever it is that I had to do that day where I felt bad about
Right.
waking up that early.
Yeah.
But there's been plenty of time when I planned to do it and I didn't get up and I didn't get it done,
And then you felt
where
bad
I
about
didn't
that.
feel the same way,
Right.
where I felt like, I regret not making it happen. So I think that as a man, as a husband, as a father, we're always challenged.
Right.
There's always going to be things that you think you'd rather do, and you have to just keep in mind bigger picture. And it's not about that instant gratification or just about yourself.
Right.
It's about just building that solid foundation where you can balance yourself in a way where you're getting things done and not just, okay, this is just what feels right for this moment, and you're not thinking what the future is going to bring or
Definitely.
how that's going to impact you in
Yeah.
the future.
100%. So if you start off the day already winning a battle, you're gonna progress through the day kind of more confident and more ready to take on the world.
Every single time. I mean, every single time when you do that, your day is just, you're looking forward to it, and no matter what challenges come at you, because again, as we just said, challenges are going to come.
Right.
I think you're able to punt them off much easier because
Yeah.
you've already, feel like you already crushed it
Did
this day.
something.
Like
Yeah.
I'm just, I'm on a roll.
Yeah.
It just gives you a little bit of that, extra kick that day. So if you do that on a regular basis, I think it just becomes easier as you ask, are there ever going to be days or periods
Smooth
where you're
sailing.
just always smooth sailing? Look, if you approach it the right way, it's just easier to not make it feel like it's
manage,
really
right.
such a big down.
Yeah.
And to manage those those negatives.
100%. Definitely. And so I want to ask about New York City. What neighborhood in New York City do you think has the most potential right now for investors?
I mean, New York City is hot. I mean, you can't really go wrong. I think no matter where you are.
Right.
I think what we're seeing is that Gowanus seems to have a lot of
Okay.
changes happening. There's been some rezoning there,
Right.
and a lot of big boys are coming in and building things there. So I think as a Brooklyn boy, for me personally, I definitely see potential there. You look in the rent stabilized game, things don't change much. So I think if you're buying apartment buildings, as long as you're within close, means of transportation
Right.
to get to work,
Yeah.
I think no matter where you are, you're pretty much going to be fine. I think some parts of Inwood as well,
Mm.
where there's also rezoning happening and new construction happening, and certain parts of the Bronx. Again, the Bronx is really, it's not a far ride on the train. South Bronx, from the city as well,
Mm.
where we're seeing a lot of money has come in, keeps coming in,
Right.
and people keep wanting to build there. So those are probably
Definitely.
the top few areas.
And so when you identify an area that you think has potential, how do you position yourself to benefit from that potential presenting itself in the future?
So I think that's when you really kind of have to go out there,
Mm.
drive around. It's very important for people for brokers to go
Right.
out and really see the blocks, walk the blocks, drive the blocks. Understand the neighborhoods, not just go off of Google Maps
Right.
and thinking that, oh, I got my street view, I'm
It's not
good.
enough. Yeah.
It's not the same thing.
Yeah.
When you're there, you feel it so much differently when you're walking those streets or you're going to show property. I'm a big believer of going to these showings personally because you're always seeing something, and besides the FaceTime with the clients, you get to know the neighborhoods much
Yeah.
better. So I think if you invest the time, ultimately it's gonna pay off for you because you have that knowledge.
Got it. Understood. And what real estate asset classes or property types do you see potential for in the coming decade?
I mean, right now it's clearly manufacturing warehouse rather
Mm,
space, I should
okay.
say. Warehousing space has been very hot.
Okay.
We've
Yeah.
seen a lot of growth in rents in that market, and that's in the asset class. Things have slowed. They have cooled. I think maybe that comes with a little bit of what's going on in the economy today. But ultimately, I think as the world changes to more, people ordering versus going inside the stores, I think that asset class has to stay
Right.
strong.
Yeah. Of course.
I can't see it going away so easily because you need that warehouse space for
Right.
the product that people are ordering constantly. Um, but again, residential, people need a place to live. I
Right. Of
mean, you
course.
can't go wrong with residential as long as you're buying at the
Price.
right
Yeah.
price, right metrics. I mean, if you have the right team,
Right.
I think that's also very, very important. Invest in that team to make sure you have the right management.
Hmm.
It's very hard to manage in New York City, and
Right.
that's why some guys have left. Ultimately, I think those two asset classes are going to continue to be very, very strong
Perfect.
going
Okay.
forward.
Amazing. And what's your perspective on commercial office, like Class B office, and how do you think that's gonna shift? Because I've seen a lot of shift into like residential or hotel types of
hmm
assets. So how do you think that's gonna progress?
I think that it's the game has changed. People are today a lot more comfortable working from home, as we
Hmm.
see, as we
Yeah.
know. I think ultimately that's going to continue driving demand
Right.
down. And it's going to be interesting what the city allows and doesn't allow
Yeah.
people to do. There's a lot of talk about perhaps allowing some of these conversions into residential,
Right.
and yet there's some pushback on that as
Yeah.
well. I think ultimately there's definitely going to continue to be a glut
Right.
of commercial, and look, I mean, frankly, if you're living in the city. You want to also have the right apartments. I'm saying if you're working from home and you're
Right.
living in a city and you're paying a lot of money for your apartment, it's a tiny apartment, that may also impact values of residential in
Yeah.
those kind of neighborhoods as well, those very dense areas. So it's a very I think it's potentially a tough time coming up for a lot of the office, especially class B, where there's so much better product,
Right.
and they don't necessarily need to be there, and if they are, they want to be in the place they are. For us, that was a big, we moved offices after 2 years starting the company.
Right.
We were lucky in a way that with COVID, prices dropped, and we were able to more than double our space for like a 20% more.
Yeah. Cheaper.
We just lucky the way our lease was structured. But we wanted an office where people want to come to. We wanted an office where guys feel good. There's light, there's air,
Right.
and it's a cool looking office. Because otherwise, again, it's already, I think, a mentality of people not coming into the office is I hear from a lot of my friends who are in the corporate world who
Right.
like, can you believe it? They're making me come in more than twice a week.
Yeah.
People
Definitely.
don't want to do it.
And what's your perspective on government regulation and how in 2019 they kind of went in and enacted these laws and that changed the landscape of multifamily?
Um, Look, I think there was a lot of unfortunate situations that happened on both sides of
Right.
this argument. I think there were definitely people who maybe took advantage of the system to a
Yeah.
certain degree that gave people a little bit of a bad
Yeah.
rap. But I do believe, again, we know a lot of the bigger owners for the most part. People pretty much play a fair game,
Mm.
and they want to deliver good quality housing to people. They just want to make sure that it's worth their investment.
Right.
So if you look at the fact that a lot of the owners are just making sure, look, we want to do the right renovations, we want to provide good, clean
Right.
housing. If they're not
There's no
incentivized to do
incentive.
it,
Yeah.
why would they invest their
Exactly.
money here? It's difficult as is already with all the regulation from paperwork and everything else that they're doing. If you can't ultimately raise rents to a certain bare minimums
Right.
that cover your expenses and give you a little bit of a return, you're going to go out of town. And
Yeah.
people have a lot of our clients have left New York City and have been investing strictly outside of New
Mm.
York. And that's a big knock for New York because we want to be the center of the world, quote unquote, right? Where people want to come and live here. And if housing becomes too expensive because there's not enough being built, because the
Right.
incentives are not there, or the renovations are not happening properly, it's going to ultimately hurt everybody.
Right. And how would you go about navigating this government intervention and politics as it affects the real estate? And how do you manage it if it's outside of your control?
So look, as brokers, there's not much we can do personally,
Right.
but I know that a lot of the owners have put together groups now
Right.
where they want to have a dialogue with, I think, the politicians
Yep.
so that everybody can understand each other. It's unfortunate, as I said, when you have certain owners who have taken advantage of the system that's
Yeah.
been put in place and just care about their bottom
Yeah.
line. I don't think that's the majority of the ownership. It's also unfortunate when politicians only want to get votes and they don't really care what's best for the city at the end of the
Right.
day.
Yeah.
And ultimately, if you look at those two extremes, I think everybody gets hurt. So I think that the ownership groups that have come and put themselves together to make sure that the right message is being sent across, the right info is being shared with people.
Right.
Everybody can understand, what's best for everybody
Both
involved. I mean,
sides.
you
Yeah.
look at New York City housing, for example, that the city runs. I mean, that's a disaster,
Yeah.
right? And it's supposed to help people.
Yeah.
Look at the violation counts and the conditions that are there. And look at ultimately, people also have to take care of the places
Yeah.
they live in. You can't just always fault the ownership when you're the one that's really, causing a lot of the issues, unfortunately.
Definitely. Yeah. Definitely. And what is your favorite part about real estate,
Wow.
of the
I
real estate
mean,
business?
yeah. I mean, look. I think for me personally, again, it's that. It's kind of that hunt, Like, I mean, as a kid, I was always into fishing. For example, I remember waking up at 3 o'clock at night to go fishing, and sometimes coming back with nothing,
Mm.
unless I'd stop by the store on the way home,
Right.
So I think I'm very much competitive. So that competition and getting that deal, getting that listing that hopefully ultimately sells is a big drive.
Right.
Ultimately that success. It's money is great, and obviously it's important. You want to have a comfortable life for
Right.
yourself, for your family. You want to give back to the community. That's also very important. I'm very involved in my community, where I am. And so you kind of, you want to hit all those things.
Mm.
And this job allows you to do that because
Mm.
it gives you the flexibility, it gives you the income potential. And, when you're succeeding, it just makes you feel accomplished. But ultimately, that's what I think makes you a happier human
Right.
being that,
Definitely.
gives back.
100%. And what would you say drives you nowadays? You mentioned that money is not as big of a factor as it may seem.
Right.
Is it money, personal achievement, family, philanthropy? And when would you say you've kind of made it and succeeded?
Um, I mean, I think ultimately it's just knowing that you are delivering for your
Mm.
clients. They're happy with the results, right? There's no better feeling when your clients are happy. I mean, it's never fun to hear that somebody did a deal and ultimately it went south on
Right.
them for whatever reason. I think that enables some of the other things you mentioned. Philanthropy is very
Mm-hmm.
important. There's a lot of people, unfortunately, that I come across in my life. A lot
Yeah.
of different causes. There's many
Hold
causes.
on
They
to that
never
money.
end. They never end. And to be able to help some of those causes. I mean, from the poor to the educational
Right.
side of it to whatever it may be that I've personally handled and have seen with my own eyes.
Right.
It makes you feel good that look, I've been blessed that I have certain success and I'm able to actually impact somebody else's life that
Right.
ultimately can get on their feet and ultimately maybe give back as well,
Right.
for the next people in their circle and the next generation or whatever it may be. I don't think in this business you can ever say, okay, I've succeeded, I'm done.
Right.
I don't think anybody should ever. I think people should never stop working. I think
Yeah.
you should never retire, maybe work a little less.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately you have to keep, challenge yourself.
Mm.
And, whether that challenge is professionally
Right.
or whether that challenge for you now becomes more philanthropic or whatever it may be, there's always work. And as
Right.
long as you can keep, having to put things on the list that you can accomplish and check them off, you got to keep a new list then at that
Keep
point,
going. Yeah.
keep going.
For sure. 100%. And I have my final question to wrap it up.
Yeah, sure.
What advice would you give your 22-year-old self about life, business, and relationships?
Um, I think first and foremost, it's probably don't be afraid to fail.
Mm.
You know, um, at the end of the day, nobody's perfect,
Yeah.
and everybody makes mistakes.
Yeah.
Everybody had to start somewhere. Um, have confidence. Have confidence and have belief that you can be successful, and don't be afraid to take certain risks.
Right.
Also,
Yeah.
calculated, smart risks. There's no better feeling than not trying. Right? If you try and you failed, you'll figure out a new
Right.
angle.
Especially when you're young.
Especially when you're young and you have the ability. If
Right.
you don't have a family to support yet at that point,
Mm-hmm.
or you don't have certain obligations, that's the time you want to really invest in yourself,
Right.
but with confidence. You have to want to do what you're doing, whatever that field may be. But just you have to stay positive and just keep pushing yourself, knowing that it's going to happen for you. If that's your true passion
Right.
and that's something you really want to do, and not just because you want to make money,
Yeah.
because you have to get up every morning and like what you do. If you don't,
Yeah.
if you just waiting for the paycheck, I don't know if that's going to be enough to really drive anybody to do anything in
Right.
life that's
Of
going to
course.
lead to success.
So be driven by a cause beyond money.
Correct. Be driven by the cause, like with the job, like the work, and be confident in
Mm.
what you're doing. Know that it's going to take time. Be
Right.
patient. know it's going to take time, and don't be afraid, to fail in the beginning.
Mm.
That's
100%.
it.
Eric, this has been super valuable, and I'm sure that there's a lot of value that young professionals can get from this and apply it to their careers moving forward.
Of
Thanks again
course,
for doing this. Really
absolutely.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you for having me.
That was great.
All right, man. Thank you.